If you're looking to get started in game development in 2026 and you're going to use the Unity game engine as your choice, these steps for installing the software, what scripting engine you should use, and how to create your first project are the things we'll cover in this video. So the first thing you want to do is head to your favorite browser. I'm going to go ahead and choose Chrome as our browser of choice. I need to go ahead and go to unity.com. And right there on the home page, Unity has provided us a blue download button. So I'm going to go ahead and click on that. And here I'm giving the download for Windows. I'm going to go ahead and choose that. This is going to open up your download location, your downloads folder. I'm going to go ahead and click on save. Let that finish downloading. And then now that I've got Unity Hub, the install version, I'm going to go ahead and click on the folder to open this up. And then I'm going to double click to open up the application. I'm going to click on yes to authorize that and then say I agree with the terms and service. This is going to save your Unity Hub to your C drive. You want to make sure you have enough space to be able to run the hub itself. And then I'm going to go ahead and install. Now that Unity Hub has finished installing, it's asking to run Unity Hub. So you'll get the checkbox there to go ahead and launch the application, or you can go ahead and check that off, and then go ahead and finish to close out the application. I'm going to close out this window, and then I'm going to minimize my web browser. And on your desktop, you should have the Unity Hub application over here. I'm going to go ahead and double click to open it up, as if once you do create your first project, this is where you would find the Unity Hub and how to open it up for the first time. Now that Unity Hub is up and running, it's asking you to sign in or create an account. If you've never made an account with Unity, you can click on the Create Your Account link, sign in with your Google account or your personal email. I already have my account, so I'm going to go ahead and sign in now. Once you've signed in to Unity, it's going to want you to load in your credentials from the browser into Unity Hub to be able to sign you in. And then now here we are on the home of Unity Hub. We're giving projects, installs, learn, resources, and licensing. And this is our setup to get ourselves started in Unity. Next up, we'll install our different versions to use and then get to our specific projects. Now that we're signed into Unity Hub, we need to go ahead and get some versions of Unity in our installs. Here they recommend to go with the latest version, which is 6.3. If you'd like to go ahead and do that, that'd be great. Or if you want to prefer to go to an older version, this is how you would go about that. I can go over to installs. This is where I can install an editor. And again, it's going to give you a bunch of recommendations to choose some older versions of Unity, or you can go back to the archives where if you needed a specific version that somebody else is using to match that same version, you can go to archive. You can go to download archive. This is going to take you to that page. The current version I'm going to be using is 6000.0.60F1. So I'm going to go over to Unity 6, then LTS, and then I'm going to scroll down and I'm going to look for that specific version. This one here is 6000.0.60F1. Some of the future projects that I'm going to be covering use this version of Unity. So let's go ahead and install that one. Click on the install button, open in Unity Hub, and then it's going to take you to the install pop-up. It's going to ask you to install Microsoft Visual Studio Community. If you're on a Windows machine, you're going to see this show up. If you're installing this on a Mac machine later on, you'll see that version where it's going to ask you to install Microsoft Visual or Microsoft Studio Code, a different lighter version of the Community. And then I'm just going to scroll down here and choose Web Build Support as well, and then go ahead and click on Continue to go ahead and agree to the terms of service for Microsoft, and then go ahead and click on that install. You can check your process on how much time is left on the build for the download there. During the download process, if you get a pop-up from Unity that's acknowledging the application install, go ahead and click on yes to take and accept that so the editor can finish downloading before it moves on to the other two installs here. Now that the Unity version has been installed, now we're on to Visual Studio Installer for the Community software. Go ahead and click on Continue. That's going to install Visual Studio's installer, which allows us to pick a couple different modules here that we're going to need for the game. So I'm going to go ahead and scroll down. If you decide you want to use Visual Studios for other types of development, web, desktop, mobile, these are all the different modules that you're going to want to install. We're going to be underneath the gaming one here. They have a Unity module. I'm going to go ahead and click on that. We don't need to check the checkbox here for Unity Hub because we already have that installed. I'm going to go ahead and click on Install here, and then go ahead and let that run and install the Visual Studio Community 2022. One thing that I would recommend as it's getting done towards the end of installing the software, if you have this start after installation, I recommend again unchecking that. Let's not run the application until it's time to go ahead and run that. I'm going to let that finish up. I'm going to go ahead and close out the Visual Studio installer, and then I can see that I've installed the editor application, the Visual Studio Community, and our web build support for our web-based games. And then if you decide you want to install other versions of Unity, you can go back here to Install Editor, choose those other recommended version, maybe some older versions of Unity or some newer versions to play test and test out the software. I would also recommend if you decide you want to start building for other desktop Windows, maybe for Mac, you can go back to Add Modules, and you can go through and add the different modules that you need to have a build for that particular application. But we're not going to go ahead and do that now. I'm going to close that out. And then on the next part, we're going to go ahead and look at how do we install or get started with our very first project. Now that we have the version of Unity that we're going to go ahead and use, we can go back to the Projects tab here. And currently we have no projects. We could import a project if you were given that from somebody else that gave you a project to work on. If you want to add one that you have locally or from a repository. But in this case, we're going to go ahead and create just a brand new project here. Click on Brand New Project. This is where you get a chance to, if normally would have your organization set up here, but if you don't have it, you can go and click on the organization that you set up for yourself. Then you can set up, okay, what is this project name going to be called? For this very first one, I'm going to go ahead and leave it as My Project here. There is a cloud icon here. Unity allows you to create your project and store it in the cloud with Unity Cloud Project, or you can create a local version. I'd recommend that you go ahead and click on My Project as a local version with the little computer icon there. And then go ahead and choose the location where you want this project to be saved. I recommend either the desktop or maybe your documents folder. So I'm going to go ahead and click on the folder here for a location. I'm going to go ahead and choose the documents folder here. This is where Visual Studio 2022 has been installed for any kind of applications that you may use with that software in the future. So let's go ahead and make a brand new folder here, and I'm going to call this Unity Projects. And inside this folder is where I want to save this project. I'm going to go ahead and select this folder, and then, well, what version should I use of Unity, or what template or core, or all these things here? Unity provides you with a bunch of different things to go through. In this case, we're going to be mainly in the Universal 2D or the Universal 3D for simple projects covering different examples, but you could go through and on your own try to download some of these samples, test them out, see what they have. They do have some learning ones for 2D platformer or a third-person FPS micro game here. These would be good to kind of play test to see what it's like to go through them. And it has a walkthrough tutorial inside of the editor. So in this case, I'm going to go ahead and just start with the Universal 2D, and then I'm going to go ahead and create that project, and then allow that to go ahead and get started and downloading the rest of the resources it needs to build this starter project. Now that the application has opened up for the first time, Unity is giving you a set layout here in the editor. The windows that you're going to use most of the time in your game development process is the hierarchy over here on the left-hand side. These are all the game objects that are in a specific scene in your game. The scene tab is where you're going to build your game in with all the different objects. The game tab, this is where you're going to play test your game in to see if it's working, any kind of bugs and so forth is in the game tab here. And that's how you would use the play button here to play test your game. The inspector is where a specific game object, all of the components that are attached to a specific game object, and we'll go into more of that later on, they'll be here in the inspector. As long as you select the object from the hierarchy, you're going to see the different components that come along with that game object. And then down here across the bottom is your project folder. These are all of the assets that are inside of your game. You're going to be mainly in this assets folder. Disregard the packages for right now, but you'll have a scenes folder. This is where all your scenes are going to be created in, and then any kind of settings that you want to set up for your project. And then the console, this is where any errors might pop up in your scripting in Unity that you need to troubleshoot will be here in the console. Unity also provides you with different layouts. If I go up here to the very top for default, they've got some different layouts here to test through, like maybe a 2x3 or maybe a 4 split. Depending on your preference and what you want to see on your screen, you may want to play test. And these are all dockable windows. So if I grab this hierarchy, I can open this up and it's a floating window, and then I can grab the tab here, hierarchy, and I can go ahead and pin that back into a specific position along the way, and then I can always go back to default at the very end to get back to that default layout that Unity gave us when creating our very first project here in Unity on Windows 11. One last step is making sure that when it comes time to setting up your scripting editor, that it goes to the correct location. Because we downloaded Visual Studio's community, the way to find this out is on the Windows version. If you go up to Edit and then go down to Preferences, you're going to look for this External Tools, and this is the External Script Editor, and it will assign the scripting editor or others that you may have installed in your computer itself. So if here in our project, just for testing purposes, if I was to right click and I want to go up to create and over And I want to either here create a mono behavior script or down to scripting. You can do that as well. There are other different ones to choose from, and we'll cover those at a later date. But for right now, I'm just going to quickly create this mono behavior script. I'm going to go ahead and hit enter just to save that file real quickly. And then once Unity itself finishes compiling, I can go ahead and double click to open up the scripting file in Visual Studio Community 2022. As you can see here, it needs you to sign into your Microsoft account, or if you've got a GitHub account, or you can create an account. Here, if we were to skip and add an account later, I believe this is going to have like a 30-day window. I know in the past when I did this, when I skipped, Visual Studio's only gave me 30 days to use the software before it wanted me to go ahead and log in to my account. So let's say I was to go ahead and skip and add account later. Now it's going to give me a chance to pick some of my settings, just a general development setting. And then I'm going to keep this on the dark theme. And then I'm going to go ahead and choose Start Visual Studio. And then I want to make sure firewall blocks some of the features. So we're going to go ahead and allow. Now, once it's loaded up for the very first time, I don't see our scripting file here. So I'm going to go ahead and just close this out real quick. And then I'm going to go ahead and double click my script file to reopen that again. And this is what you should see when you open up the file for the first time, is we have our using statement and then our public class for our script. This is what you should be able to see in order for you to use the Visual Studio Community 2022 if you are on a Windows machine. One other alternative to the Microsoft's Visual Studio Community scripting editor is a software by JetBrains called Rider. So if you search up JetBrains Rider, this is a great alternative to the Microsoft's Visual Studio, especially on the Mac computers. The Visual Studio Code, which is the other version from Microsoft, it's not the greatest. So I'd recommend downloading Rider here for your scripting editing over on the Mac. Once we get over to that and cover getting set up on the Mac for game development, I will cover downloading the software, but you do need to create an account here as well in order to use the Rider software, but it has a lot of good features built in that are, I think, better than the studio version, but it's all personal preference. But I wanted to give you that option that there is another one. It's also free for non-commercial use. Most of my students prefer to use this one at home versus Microsoft's Visual Studio. Now that we saw the installation process on a Windows machine, here I have Unity Hub already installed on my Mac computer, but I did want to show you the difference in the installation setup. So on the Unity Hub, if I go to installs, and then I'm going to go to install editor, and here I'm going to look at this current 6.3 version here. If I go ahead and click on install for this on a Mac, this is what you're going to see that's different than a Windows machine, is that under the dev tools, they have Visual Studio Code as the recommended dev tool, and I've already installed this, so I don't need to do that. As well as I want to make sure that I'm always doing the web build support for games via HTML. And then I'm going to go ahead and install the 6.3 version, similar to our other versions that we did on the Windows machine. And then I'm going to take a look and just watch this progress, and then we'll check back when this is done. Now that the Unity 6.3 version was installed, everything else about Unity on the Mac versus the Windows is the same, other than that dev tool to decide on which IDE that you want to use to write your scripting files in. All the projects are the same. Creating that new project's the same. The naming, the templates, where you want to place that, all that is the same setup, except for the install with the dev tools. And that's pretty much it. Now that you're all set up and installed and ready to go, let's go ahead and start to work on creating our first project. See you in the next video.